Donald Trump's travel ban is going into effect this summer. Federal courts had previously put two different versions of the ban on hold to resolve questions about its constitutionality. And on June 26th, the Supreme Court ruled that the ban can take effect with some limitations before the High Court reviews it in the fall. The ban stops all tourists from 6 majority Muslim countries from entering the US for at least 90 days and all refugees for at least 120 days, unless they already have a visa or have a bona fide relationship with a person or organization in America. Trump's bans could almost be over by the time the court hears the case. Trump called the Supreme Court's decision a clear victory for our national security, and he did title it,
"This is the protection of the nation from foreign terrorist entry into the United States."
After the first ban was put on hold by a judge in Washington and the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, Trump signed what was, in his words, a quote, watered-down version with the same title. But there is absolutely no evidence for such a security benefit. Americans were more likely to be killed by their own clothes than by an immigrant terrorist. And nobody in the US has been killed in a terrorist attack by immigrants from these particular 6 nations in the last 40 years. But while the temporary bans have gotten all the headlines, the order has sent the US down the path of a fundamental shift in American refugee policy, reviewing all admitting procedures and announcing that in the future, refugees will only be admitted from countries that ensure the security and welfare of the United States. This is the opposite of how the US has defined refugees in the past. People fleeing persecution and violence that their own governments cannot or will not protect them from. And this comes at a time when the world faces its biggest refugee crisis since World War II, when 1 in 122 people are displaced. So if you're worried about US terrorist attacks like 9/11, San Bernardino, or the Orlando Pulse shooting, this order would have prevented none of them. But if you happen to be afraid of Muslims, this ban might sound pretty good. It falls in line with Trump's anti-Muslim statements, the most famous of which he said during the campaign.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
The attitude that people fleeing terror, war, and famine are dangerous. That attitude resulted in the infamous decision in June 1939 to turn away the St. Louis, a ship carrying 937 Jewish refugees fleeing another hostile government, Hitler's. First, they were turned away in Cuba.
The liner St. Louis turned back from Cuba.
Then they approached Florida, but the U.S. Coast Guard patrolling the waters kept them away too. They eventually disembarked in Belgium, the Netherlands, and France.
Jewish unfortunates without a country permitted to land in Belgium after 5 weeks of suspense afloat.
And hundreds died in the Holocaust. Since then, the U.S. government has been the world's leader in resettling refugees.
They finally reach a haven of safety.
The State Department website still brags about it, claiming 3 million refugees resettled around all 50 states since 1975. The Statue of Liberty bears these goals too. A plaque on the pedestal reads, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." America hasn't always lived up to these lofty goals. But since World War II, we've lived in an era where the diversity of who gets to come to America has gone up and up, regardless of where you come from. The Trump administration has been trying to end this era since January. After multiple defeats, it's won its first battle in seeing through this vision. Lawyers and protesters are sure to try to preserve it around the country and this fall in the Supreme Court.